So we're making bruschetta for knife skills. What I have is everything sort of mise en place and ready to go. So all of my ingredients are here. I left them whole so you could see everything. This is my scrap bin, so you want to have something to put your scraps into. We'll move the bread out of the way. My area is sanitized, and then I have all of my knives. So serrated knife with the sawtooth looking edge. I have a paring knife, just to show you, a boning knife, right? So we'll go over the knives in a minute, but this is the one that has the really like flexible blade so that you can kind of really get in there against and like cut the meat away from the tendons and the bone and everything. I have my honing steel and my santoku knife. So the santokus have the little indentations. It releases the food away from it. And then this is my sheet pan to put my prepped food on so you guys can see it nicely. My coffee for sustenance. And then this little guy, I wish I had enough to, they're kind of expensive. I only have about 6 or so, but it's a sort of like a chef ruler. And so if you look here, it has the different size cuts, julienne, a bâtonnet, brunoise, fine julienne, a fine brunoise, which is really, really thin, 1/16 of an inch. Anyway, just so you know, some nice, it's like a little cheat sheet, kind of. So anyway, I have that. If you were interested in going into industry and you wanted to practice cuts, this is a really great tool to do that with. So I'll put that there. Okay. Then for our, we'll start with the tomato concasse because it's going to take just a little bit. But what you want to do is get a small saucepan. So this is a saucepan. Hold sauces, right? It's not a saute pan, is the wide, not as deep one. This is a saucepan. So let's just put that over heat to get it to a boil. And as we're bringing that to a boil, what you want to do is remove the core from your tomato. So best way to do that is just to take a paring knife and to sort of just drag your knife, right, gently saw away, and then just like pop out the core from the tomato. Okay, and then on the reverse side, we're going to make our X. So you're just cutting a little bit into the tomato, maybe like 1/4 of an inch. Just make an X. All right, and then we can set that aside. If you guys are at home with a cutting board, to ensure that your board isn't sliding, you can put a wet paper towel or just like a wet kitchen towel underneath it so that it doesn't slide. Okay, I was gonna grab my chef's knife here. So this is my chef's knife. It's not the one that I use at home. It's one at school because I don't trust people. So it's fine. It's not a full tang, right? This is stamped, not forged. But the blade's sharp enough because I don't use it too much because I just use it here at work. But like, you know, decent quality. Tip, right? The belly or the cutting edge. This is the blade. This is the spine. Down here, this doesn't have really a bolster, but the bolster is here. This is the heel. The handle, the tang would run all the way through. This one doesn't even have rivets, and it's probably, this is kind of like a grippy silicone type of rubber material, and then that's the butt, right? So chef's knife, this is my santoku that I use here at school. Again, my little paring knife, boning steel, boning, and serrated. So the serrated we'll use for our bread, which I guess we could go ahead and do. So everybody should have had a piece of bread when you picked up your ingredients. So this is a nice French loaf, nice and crusty. Crostinis should be on a relatively small piece of bread. So what you want to do for bread is use a serrated knife, and then you want to use kind of like a sawing motion. I'm just going to cut this in half. Ooh, this bread is crunchy. Got a little crusty, huh? And I cut out a diagonal to make the pieces a little bit bigger. If you cut it straight on, it's fine, but they'll just be a little bit smaller. And I like the bias look. I think it looks really nice. Okay. So we'll put that aside. And I was going to put my wet towel underneath my cutting board to keep it from slipping around, right? So it's going to hold it in place a little bit better. Okay, now to cut your crostinis, you want them like, I don't know, 1/2 inch. And so overhand grip, right, on the knife, none of this. This really puts a lot of strain on your tendon. You don't have as much control. So overhand grip, you can grip up if that's more comfortable for you, but just focus on like knuckles to the sky, making your claw, right? So your little like claw hand, or they say like a C to an N, and then placing your hands here. So your fingertips are in the food, and then the knife is going to sort of graze your knuckle, and then really tuck your thumb. You don't want this thumb to be like flying out, right? So tuck your thumb and just make a nice cut. This is some hard bread. Okay, so then you should have like little pieces like this. I'm just gonna lay those out. This bread is a little bit harder, so holding it like this isn't enough. I have to like grip the whole bread, just FYI. Okay, so I have a nice bias cut here. This one I'm not going to use. It's got a big hole in it, right? Which is, you know, nice and part of bread, but the topping's going to go right through that, so I'll just save that for later. So crostinis are great to use with a little bit older bread or bruschetta because you're going to toast it anyway. Okay, so I just have a few pieces of bread right there. I'm going to leave that alone and set this aside. Okay, so we have a tomato. Next thing, you guys should have some Parmesan. If it's not already grated, you'll want to make sure you grate that. My water is still coming to a boil. I don't usually buy pre-grated. It's just easier with you guys to portion and stuff like that. Usually when things pre-grated, it's kind of coated and it doesn't melt the same. It doesn't taste the same. I prefer to grate it myself. It's a little bit fresher. This is a pretty good quality pre-grated Parmesan, but the stuff you get in like the tubs is really like caked, and it just doesn't like melt the same as fresh grated. If you take a fresh piece of Parmesan and you grate it, you can see it's really fine, and it's going to melt a lot better. So just FYI. So they put in usually like, yeah, like a starch of some sort to prevent caking, to keep the pieces kind of separate and clean. And they, anyway, if you've ever bought like pre-grated cheese, you should know what I'm talking about. It's not the same. Okay, so we'll just leave that aside. While this is almost boiling, let me explain garlic real quick. So this is a garlic bulb, right? It's a whole bulb, otherwise known as a head of garlic. And then within each head of garlic or bulb of garlic are the individual cloves, like this, yes? So this is an individual clove of garlic. They all have the little like skin would be the word on them. So for a head of garlic, you can kind of just peel from the top down to expose the bulbs, and then you kind of just pop out the bulbs, right? So a lot of times a recipe will say like 2 cloves of garlic. And the thing is, this is a nice beefy garlic. Oh, my water's boiling, so we're gonna, okay, well, I'll finish my thought. The thing with the garlic cloves is like, these are pretty large, right? And this is significantly smaller. So like 2 of these is a lot less garlic than 2 of these. So that's where you just kind of use your judgment. I like a lot of garlic. I think garlic's delicious and you can never have too much. So like I would prefer to use 2 of these versus 2 of these, right? So I'm going to use these guys because they're nice and big and beefy. I'm just kind of set them aside. This is boiling. I realized I didn't get my skimmer. Well, you only want to let it boil for like 15 seconds. So within those 15 seconds, so I'm going to drop the tomato in. I'm going to run. You should run in your kitchen, so don't run. Skimmer. Okay. And you should be able to see where the X is. The skin's kind of going to get a little bit loose. Sorry, that sun's kind of blaring in. Okay, perfect. Because you don't want to cook the tomato. So I was able to see, and now I'm going to plop it in my ice water. This is a skimmer. Also great for like frying things and removing them from the grease. I'm going to shut this blind real quick. That should be a lot better. Yeah. So my tomato was blanched, and you should be able to see, hopefully, how the peel is just kind of peeling right off. That's what you want. Right. So tomato from ice water. I'm going to move my scrap container here, and it just peels off. And the reason we do this is because the tomato skin can be really tough and kind of like unpleasant. So by doing this, you're going to have a nice smooth consistency. Right, so it just popped off, and now I have this beautiful, very slippery tomato. So what I'm going to do with my tomato is dice it. I'm going to use my Santoku knife just because I love it the most. But otherwise, you would want to use the chef's knife. I'll save my chef's knife to show you how to do the honing steel. So if you cut it in half, not from like stem to butt, but horizontally, like this, you should be able to see the tomatoes inside, the seeds inside, right? And then you can just use your finger to scoop out the seeds. The thing with the seeds is, you know, they just can add a little bit too much moisture to something like a bruschetta, which is, I mean, it's fine. It just depends what you're using it for. I just thought sometimes there are so many seeds that I don't want all those seeds. So just getting a little bit of them out. Bench scraper to kind of keep my space clean. I'm going to scrape the juices into my bin. So I want to make sure my workspace is nice and neat. Okay. So from here, you can dice up your tomato. Doesn't really matter. Just know that when you're cutting something that's round, you would want it to be, you try to make it a flat surface. So to cut it like this is going to be a lot more precarious because it's on kind of a curved it's curved, right? So it doesn't lay flat, whereas if you put it on a flat piece, that'll be a little bit easier. So I want nice small dice, so I cut it in half, and now I can set it on this half. I'm going to cut it in half again like this, lay it back on its side, and make a few chops, rotate it, and then chop it into nice small dice, right? So when you're cutting, it's a sort of a forward and down motion. You're not cutting like that. That's wrong, okay? It's a forward and down motion. And then it's a gentle sliding through the product, okay? If you notice, I'm using pretty much like the center of the knife to sort of like, I'm using like this much of the knife. I'm not using the tip right now, and I'm not using the heel. I'm using like the belly of the knife, right? So I'm cutting it. You could cut it in half this way too. Doesn't really matter. You just want to slice it consistently. So if you've ever cut a tomato before and your knife doesn't go through, it's because the skin's really tough or your knife is really dull. A way to go through would be you could use a serrated knife to kind of cut through that tough skin. Ideally, if you're not cutting through the skin, your knife's not sharp enough, right? So ideally, you should be able to cut through your tomato with your knife. You would just need to sharpen it. So just sliding through, making sure you have a nice small dice. Okay, so what I see a lot is kind of like this motion. It's incorrect, or people will cut like reverse, but it's a grip the food and it's a forward and down sort of sliding motion. Okay, I'm going to set that aside and move all this loveliness over here. Now, let's go ahead and do our garlic. So I have 2 garlic cloves. There are a few ways to peel garlic. If you're peeling a lot of garlic, I would recommend having a wet towel nearby because garlic's really sticky. Some people will say, like, put it in a mason jar and shake it around and the skins come off. Like, yes, but the easiest way to do it is just to smash your garlic with a knife. So place your blade flat on the garlic, and then with the heel of your hand, kind of just crush it. And then the skin should pop off a little bit easier that way. Yeah, and you have your nice peeled garlic. So just give it a good whack. Be like relatively aggressive with it. Okay. So if I were doing many of these, I would definitely want to have like a wet rag nearby or like a bowl of water that you can, because garlic's just really sticky. Sanitizing rag. Ready. Keep my space clean. Okay. All right, so did everybody do that? Hopefully. If you guys have questions, type them in the Google chat. It's easier for me to see that way. Okay, I'm gonna cut off just the little end bit there in my bin. Finished with this. So I can get that out of the way and move this a little bit closer to me. All right, so we're gonna mince garlic. Okay, garlic raw is a pretty powerful flavor. If you've never had garlic raw, take a bite right now. See how it tastes. It's pretty intense and kind of spicy. So mincing is a great way to like release the oils, but still maintain some of that kick. The other way you could do it is to smash it. A I'll do both. So for mincing, what you do is grip your garlic, and then just take your knife and kind of run it through, and then gather it back up and run it back through till you have nice small pieces. Now, once it gets pretty small, what you want to do is keep your non-dominant hand, the hand that's normally like in the claw position. You want to keep that on the knife here as sort of like a resting point, and then just really gently, it's not like a death grip, it's just like a gentle up and down motion with this hand. So you hold it down, and then you just move up, down, up, down, up, down. And it's not your typical grip, right? It's not this. That's just like, you don't need to put so much force into it. Just up, down, up, down. And this hand holds this stationary, and then this is like a little Pac-Man. Chop, 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 chop. Right? A little chomp, chomp. And you want to run your knife through this a lot until it gets pretty fine. What I see sometimes is people like hold their hand and they're like doing something like this. This hand is holding the tip down, and then it's not the same without this hand. So this hand holds the tip down, and then the hand that's on the blade is just moving up and down very gently. Right? That's a mince, and you run over it. You should start to smell the garlic. It's going to release some of the oils, but not too many. Maintain a lot of the spice in there, a lot of that strong garlic. All right, so it's a pretty small cut. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's really, really fine. So you're just mincing it. It's not like a cube. You're just running your knife through it a bunch to get it pretty small. Okay. I try to have my bench scraper around, even when I'm, like especially for dough, but also for just chopping, because it can preserve your knife. If you're not when you're dragging your knife like this all the time, you're just going to dull it quicker. All right. So for if you wanted to make like a garlic spread type of thing, you can smash your garlic, and then you can take your knife and you can kind of push. So I have the blade facing out, okay, out at an angle. I'm holding it, and then I'm using this heel of this hand to kind of press and smush the garlic. This releases a lot more of the oil that's present in the garlic, this motion. So you're actually going to get different flavors. And so you can kind of press your garlic over and over. So I don't know, I wish you guys could see this, but there's definitely more like garlic juice present on my cutting board, which is fine, if that's what you want, but you want to make sure sometimes pressing the garlic can release too much of the juice. So you just got to be careful. So just kind of taking your blade, you can also just use your fingers. You don't have to really get into it once it starts to get a little bit smaller, and just smushing that into there. So it's a little bit different. That's more of like a crushed garlic and more of a paste than the other. Okay. So we have minced garlic and crushed garlic. It smells so good. I love garlic. Now we're going to practice a chiffonade. And if you guys are cleaning your knife, you're chopping and you want to get the stuff off, just be really careful. You can use your finger to just swipe it off, but don't like drag the knife like this. Not a good idea. And then having a sanitizing rag around is a great idea. So this is just clean sanitizing rag that I can use for like wiping down my knife and like cleaning off my cutting board. It just is like a very light bleach solution, 50 parts per million. That's what you're aiming for. So it shouldn't smell like a swimming pool. That's too much. All right, so basil. You have to be really delicate with basil because it's a fragile little herb and it can bruise pretty easily. So what you do to do a chiffonade is you pick the basil. You don't want the stem, so pick the stem away. Take a couple of leaves. I gave you each like a pretty decent bunch for those of you who picked up ingredients. So you take your little basil leaves like this, and you sort of just stack them. Not too many at once. Maybe like 3 would be good to start with for you guys. So you stack your leaves. Right? I'll just do a few. And then what you do is you really tightly roll your leaves, and then hold it, and then gently slide through your leaves with the knife. So you're tightly rolling, but you're being really gentle with the knife, because if you take your basil like this and you just kind of chop the crap out of it really aggressively, you're going to bruise it. It's going to get black and it's going to get kind of smushy and it's not going to look as pretty. So it's a really gentle sliding motion, and then you should have these really nice thin strips, and that's a chiffonade. Okay. So these really nice thin strips. I really like basil, so I'm going to do a little bit more. So again, you stack it, roll it tight, and then it's just a really thin cut. And gentle, right? Be gentle. Don't be aggressive. Got to treat your basil with respect. All right. You could mince your basil too, and if you were mincing basil to put on top, same thing. You just want to be kind of gentle about it. You don't want to be like, and like kill it. Like treat it gently, okay? But you could mince the basil. Yeah. So this basil here is already starting to get a little. It was left out in a hot environment, so it's kind of how it starts to go bad, and you can encourage that by bruising it, which you don't want. Okay, so hopefully you guys have your everything prepped. Yes? Just gonna move this stuff out of the way. So this is my sheet pan. What I would do now, if I had a functioning oven, is I would take some olive oil. Well, I'm still going to take the olive oil, but I would toast it. So what you would want to do is, I gave everybody a little plastic portion cup, right, of olive oil. So you could take that olive oil and just like drizzle it on. You don't want too much. I'm going to be a little aggressive right here. But just a nice drizzle on there. The other thing you could do is use your pastry brush. So dip your pastry brush and kind of brush olive oil on. That would be another option. Just drizzling just a little bit. This guy's kind of big, so it's a little bit harder. But if you have a smaller thing, and you want to use olive oil because olive oil has a really great flavor. You know, it's delicious. You don't want too much because it could overpower it, but you're going to brush it with olive oil, and a little goes a long way. So just a little bit, kind of brush it on there if you have a brush. If not, just drizzle it. I don't have a great drizzler here, but like a squeeze bottle works really well. I have one, it just doesn't have olive oil in it. At home, I have like an oil bottle with a specific oil top for drizzling. So something like that. And then you can pop it in the oven for just a couple minutes on broil. So when you're broiling something in the oven, the heat's coming from the top and instead of the bottom. And so that heat coming from the top really cooks the top of it. So you could broil it with a little bit of cheese. So you could put your cheese on it and then broil it to give it a nice little melty. If you don't have an oven with a broiler, you could just, before you put the olive oil on, just toast it in a toaster. You just want it to get nice and crunchy. It should be like toast, okay? What I'm going to do is just put the cheese on it I'm going to show you a couple different ways that we can do it. So I'll do 2 with cheese on the bottom, then I'll do some with cheese on the top to show you how to kind of display it a little bit nicer. All right. So if you guys are doing this at home, go ahead and get your bread nice and toasty, and then you can do the rest. Yeah, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to melt the Parmesan either. That's fine. You could just sprinkle it on the bottom, and then on these guys, I'm going to sprinkle it on the top. Okay. I'll give you like 2 minutes to kind of get caught up. I'm going to go get some balsamic real quick to show you guys how to do balsamic production. So balsamic vinegar is really lovely. I have a big thing of it. And as you reduce it, you're letting the water content evaporate out, and you're concentrating the flavors along with some of that pungent vinegar. It evaporates, and you're going to have like a reduced, so a thicker, more viscous syrup that's sweeter. Still a little vinegary, but it definitely, as you reduce it, the sugars stay and they kind of concentrate and cook a little bit, and they become a little bit thicker. So I'm going to just put some balsamic in here. It's strong, right? But if you compare balsamic vinegar to like white wine or apple cider, or even just like distilled vinegar, it has a sweeter, smoother scent than some other vinegars. Can be really powerful, but as it's cooking, it really kind of kicks up that vinegar waft into the air. All right, so I'm gonna swap that out for this guy. And then if you're making a reduction at home, just nice and low heat, okay? So I'm gonna show you how I'm going to assemble these. So right now I have, I'll just take some of these so you can see a little bit better. I have these 3 with garlic. So let's do, okay, I'm gonna take my smushed garlic on this one, and I'm kind of just gonna spread it on there with my knife. Use like a spoon or something if you wanted. I'm gonna put my knife and kind of take the smushed garlic on these 3. Just really smush it and spread it. This is gonna be like amazingly garlicky. The other way to do it would be to like mix all the ingredients together, which I'll show you as well, I guess, maybe for those guys. We're doing smushed garlic. We're going to take some tomatoes and put them on there. Then we're going to season. So whenever you're seasoning, you want to season from high up. If you season like this, you're more likely to get clumps. So you want to give it a little height so that you have a more even distribution of the seasoning. So I'm going to take some salt, just sprinkle in there. So I just always have like a little tub of salt. And then a little bit of black pepper. Not too much. Pepper is a pretty strong seasoning. And we're going to talk about the difference between seasonings and flavorings tomorrow, because I don't think we'll have time today. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of my basil and just kind of pop it on there like this, right? So really nice, really simple. Now the next way to do it, and you know that, well, So the thing with bruschettas is that you really want a good quality tomato. If your tomatoes are mealy, if they're not super fresh, like they're just not going to taste as good. So you really want to try to get like a good tomato. Okay, like this one I'm looking at it. It's a little pale. It's a little mealy. Like it'll be okay, but it's not ideal. All right. So what I'm going to do now is for the next one, I'm actually going to mix everything together. So I'm going to take my tomatoes, sprinkle them with salt in a bowl, a little pepper. Pepper's strong, and I'm just going to use my hand to kind of mix it up. Now, if you were serving this in a restaurant, because it's not requiring further cooking, right? Everything's raw. You would want to use gloves. So anytime you're doing something raw, well, it's considered ready to eat. So it's ready to eat, meaning it doesn't require further preparation. You're going to use gloves, okay? If it's food that is going to be cooked, like go into the oven to bake or go on the stove, you don't have to use gloves because you're going to cook. I mean, you want to wash your hands, of course, but yeah, if it's food that's considered ready to eat, you would want to wear gloves. And then I'm going to take my garlic and also I'm going to pop that in there as well. And so this is going to be a little more marinade-y than versus like that has the layers. In hindsight, I'm just realizing I should have done the Parmesan on the bottom of these guys as well. But maybe we'll do, I guess I could do a little Parmesan on the top. There, just a little bit, right? Okay. So you can kind of organize it like however you want. All right, I have some movement in my balsamic. So I don't know if you can see like the steam coming out, but as it's cooking like this, it's really releasing a lot of strong vinegar scents, and it gets pretty potent. And so we're releasing some of the vinegar. We're cooking off that pungentness, and we're going to concentrate it down into a thick, sweeter syrup. And then even for this one, I'll put some of the basil in here. I'm going to put some parm in here too, I guess. If it were melty, I would leave it on there, but we'll kind of do some parm. Okay. And then for these guys here, I'm just going to take my little tomato mixture, pop it on there. So different ways of displaying a little bit, right? Melty cheese, not melty cheese. They should be toasted though. Your bread should be toasted. Right? Ovens just aren't working. You can mix everything together. You can layer it. But no matter what you do, you want to season everything well, right? So I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to give these just a little bit of sprinkle of parm to make it look nice, right? And then put those right there. So they look very similar, but they will, I wish you guys could taste it, they will taste differently because of the smushed garlic versus the minced garlic, and because of the way that I've kind of mixed the ingredients, they will take on different flavors, even though they're the similar flavor palette. The seasonings are different, and they're going to give you similar flavors, of course, because the flavors are the same, but it's just going to react a little differently in your mouth because of how the seasonings have really like added to it and allowed it to extract juices and stuff like that. So when you add salt to something, it draws out the moisture. So something like if you were to be frying eggplant or zucchini or something, what you would want to do is to sprinkle that with salt first, or if you're baking it and you don't want a lot of the juice So even if you're not frying it, you sprinkle it with salt on paper towels and allow the salt to draw out those juices, and it's going to dry out like your zucchini or your eggplant or whatever it is. And then you're not going to have that moisture as you're cooking it. So as you're frying it or as you're baking it, you're not going to get as many juices. But the same thing's going to happen now with our tomatoes. So these guys here that I mixed in the bowl with the salt's really going to draw those juices. And so either if I want the juices, I'll use them. But if not, I'll kind of let the juices fall. So it's just going to have a little different of a sensation. So I'm reducing this down. Balsamic out of the jar is really liquid, right? Like when you buy it, like this. So super thin, like you could pour it like water. As it cooks, it's going to thicken and become pretty viscous so that when I drizzle it, you'll see that you'll be able to see the line. You want to be slow about it. You don't want to do it too quickly. I have enough to maybe make one more, so. Oh, there's my piece of bread. So I have my piece of bread right here. Let's scrape this off. Okay, right, keep your workspace clean. Just take my sanitizing towel real quick. Get the juices off. If you're doing the same, like all of this stuff's getting mixed together, you don't have to worry about like sanitizing your station thoroughly. But like if you were switching tasks and it was going to be something different that you're cooking, you would want to make sure you like wash and sanitize your cutting board or get a different one, especially if it was like chicken. You wouldn't just wipe the sanitizing rag over it, right? Like that's not how you would do it. You would go to the sink, wash, rinse, sanitize. So I'm going to do one more here. Oh, man, crusty bread. Splash of olive oil. Splashes are hard with this big guy. But just a little drizzle of olive oil. You can take your brush it in if you have it. Use a spoon, would even like to rub it in, like kind of place it. You can pour the olive oil on a spoon and then do like that. And then just a little bit of this on there. Okay. So it's nice, right? It's pretty, it looks good. It has a great flavor, especially with like all that garlic. And it's a nice like appetizer. So the reason you would want to toasty these up too is it makes it easier to eat. Like right now, this is pretty crunchy. Like this bread is, you know, it's a little bit harder. So if it's toasty, then you just bite it and it's like crunch. Like it's more like a cracker, a piece of toast versus like trying to get through this like kind of chewy bread. So that's another reason for toasting the bread. It also, toasting the bread, it won't absorb as much as the juices, so it'll stay crispier for longer. I'm gonna this is gonna take a while, so I'm gonna let this go as we're kind of like wrapping up our bruschetta, and then we're gonna move into our knife skills. Do you guys have any questions so far? Did anybody do this with me? Hopefully.
Miss, can I add some rosemary?
Yeah, that would be fine. Rosemary is a really strong herb, so I would just make sure to not do too much.
Yeah, because we just got some rosemary and dried it over this spring /summer.
Perfect. Yep, you do just like a little sprinkle. Yeah, rosemary, cinnamon, paprika are kind of those ones that can be like really intense. They're easy to overdo. So just a little bit, but yeah, that would be good. And that's the beauty of bruschetta is you can like do whatever you want with it, right? Like you don't want basil, don't put basil. You don't want cheese, you don't have to put Parmesan. You could put a soft cheese on the bottom, like a ricotta, or you could put like a stronger cheese like a brie, or you could do feta. There's so many options with making your bruschetta that you can really like. It's a great way to just use up leftover bread that's going stale right? So it's kind of getting hard. You toast it and it's like a little cracker. It should be nice golden, like really golden on it, so you want it crispy. So it's a great way to use up leftover bread. It's a great way to use up like stuff that's gonna go bad. Really, really tons of options. Okay, so I'm gonna stop this recording real quick. And then I'm gonna show you guys a couple knife cuts and